I thought I could be really insufferable with this new UK deal that's been announced because a lot of it I had been predicting months ago. After, of course, the last general election, I was talking about how Starmer and Lammy were laying the groundwork for a lot of the good stuff that we are now seeing today to come. That it was going to show you that, yes, not only did the UK, with a sensible government, want to work with the EU, but so too would the EU want to work with the UK on a number and range of things. That all of this was imminently possible and doable if you had a government that was willing to sit down and work with the EU, which guess what? We got. And I was very, very tempted to go back over those videos and just sit there and go, hey, so and so, you said this. Guess what? I'm right. I know a certain video, or a certain person made a video of me at the end of last year, um, calling me like one of the biggest failures of like 2024. Uh, where I was again making those claims. I was right. He was wrong. I'm not going to get an apology off him, but that's fine. Hey, I am magnanimous in my victory. But oh boy, is this good. This has been good, 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 good. This is not a complete fixing, of course, of Brexit, but the whole point of this, of course, is the opportunity. This now opens the door to further opportunities. One of the things I always said is you get to a point where you look at the deal and you're like, hold on, if we are working so well with the EU and all this stuff is being achieved, why aren't we in the single market and customs union? Why aren't we members of the EU? That generally seems to be where we're going in the direction of travel. That's what I've constantly talked about all this time. And the number of people who have said that I'm wrong or that the EU is just not going to listen or that going to like shoo us away or none of this type of deal that we're about to go over will ever be achieved, especially the defense deal stuff where I talked about this. And people were telling me, oh no, the EU won't want to do this type of defense deal with you and have access to that new defense spending package that they just spent. And to my response was that why on earth would they not want us involved in that where we are the second highest defense spender in Europe? Guess what we are in today? Anyway, let's get on into this because I think this is something that should be definitely talked about. So before we do, of course, as always, please do remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Patreon, all that good stuff down below. So let's crack on then into this. So Starmer's reset hailed by EU chief, but slammed by the UK Conservatives, because of course it is. You know, the Conservatives, as we always said, ideologically bound that they cannot work with the EU. They have to treat it as the enemy. And if I was Starmer now, I'd be calling out any time any Conservative or Reform or Nigel Farage calls this out. I'd go, hey, this is what this deal does. How on earth could you have gotten better? What would you have done to have, quote, got better? Like, just start calling them out on this. And I think this is where we now need to start seeing some of this stuff really pushed hard on this. So, Keir Starmer has now sealed an agreement with the European leaders. It lays now for a groundwork for closer collaboration with the bloc, while revealing the political peril now of the Prime Minister's own revisiting of the terms of Brexit. The negotiations, which reached a deal overnight when the UK agreed now to extend the fishing rights in exchange for the removal of the vast majority of border checks on food and agricultural goods. And that is good. One of the big industries that has been suffering because of Brexit is our food industry. When it's your literally closest market, makes sense. If you're going to be transporting food, you want to be able to sell it to the shortest distance you can. Shortest places you can sell that to is in Europe. So the fact that we have now got the vast majority of these border checks removed, I think is good. The other thing I also mentioned up there, closer collaboration in the bloc. That leaves the door open to a lot more opportunities later down the line. So they also now revealed a major pact on the military collaboration, which is again something I did also say would probably happen as well, and pledged to reach an agreement on Britain's access to the 150 billion euro defence fund, as well on such as issues as e-gates at airports and the ability now of young Europeans to live, move and work and study out across borders. Again, all that very, very, very good. Very, very good. Especially the defence one. I called it. I called that 100%. I'm sorry. As I said at the time, we are the second largest defense spender in Europe. Why on earth would Europe not want us in that? You know? Anyway. So, let's continue with this. At a time, of course, of global instability, when our continent now faces the greatest threats it has faced for generations, we in Europe, of course, stick together, said the European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen at the joint press conference in London alongside Starmer and European Council President Antonio Costa. Starmer, repeatedly referred to as dear by Costa and de Villan, said that the deal now will be good for UK consumers and businesses, agreeing that this Labour government has now sealed 3 deals, of course, in a matter of weeks. Britain is now on the world stage, working with our partners, doing deals that will grow our economy. He said, well, those other 2 deals that you've done, questionable, shall we say, at most. Probably very little economic value. But the EU one is good. Does it undo all the damage of Brexit, of course, but it will go a long way, and certainly to helping fix a lot of it. That is why you are seeing such an absolute feedback on this from the Conservatives and Farage. They are foaming, brimming at the mouth because they don't want people to realise that actually all this collaboration with Europe was very, very good for the UK. Because if people start to realise that, then they might start to ask questions like, why did we leave in the first place? What did we leave for? So, however, of course, the reciprocal fishing rights given European crews access to the UK waters could, of course, be potentially risky for Starmer, who faces an electoral threat from Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Fishing is, of course, a very totemic issue in the UK, despite just making up 0.04% of GDP. It's nothing. And I would repeat this time and time and time and time and time again. Why on earth would you just throw the rest of the UK economy under the bus for something that makes up just such a small percentage of GDP? Why on earth? Why on earth would you do such a thing? You just wouldn't. It's just completely different. And as we just talked about before, the fishing industry is going through huge changes. You know, it's not about catching fish anymore, especially when it comes to the UK industry, and same for the European one as well. It's about taking those fish, processing them on the land, and then selling that processed fish on then. And that is what has been the big stopper to this. And I'll be interested to see what effects, and if I will, but this would be something I'd be keeping a very, very close eye on. What effects does this deal now have on the UK fishing industry? Does it make it easier for fishermen to now sell their catch into the EU? I'm not 100% sure of the deal yet, but if that does have an effect, I'd be like, hey, fishermen can now sell their catch into the EU. It's improving their money. When the previous bad deal was in place, they couldn't do that. They're now making X amount of more money. Isn't that good for fishermen? Then every time Farage can come back and say, oh, but they're having European fish having access to our waters, but look how much money more the UK fishermen are making because we did that deal. So there's stuff and arguments that obviously have to be made. This is something we definitely have to keep a watch out for on. I've said this before, that now the fact, Farage is in Parliament, any Brexit issue, he's going to go froth at the mouth at and try and replay the good old classics. One thing that we should absolutely be doing is trying to get fishermen on side and saying, hey, people like Farage, he sold you down the river. He didn't care about you. He used you as a political football before and during Brexit. He's now returning to play to play with you again. Don't let him fool you this time. He is not your fisherman's friend. Well worth repeating and trying to get these fishermen on side on this. So back to this. 12 years now of access to British waters is 3 times longer than the government wanted. Kemi Badnock wrote on Twitter, referring to our early reports now of a 4-year extension, saying we're becoming a rule taker from Brussels once again. Farage, of course, meanwhile, said that the fishing deal will be an end of the industry. No, it won't. But on the other side of the debate, Stuart Ross, a veteran retail industry boss and, of course, a Conservative peer who campaigned against Brexit, said it was pathetic that some Tories were calling the deal a British surrender, saying what we should be talking about is about not what we gave up, Rose told the Radio Times, but it should be talking about the opportunity. I 100% agree. That's what we should absolutely be talking about. Anytime you've got, Conservative, whatever, Brexiteer talking about all this stuff we gave up, turn around and just thought, well, actually, this opportunity, this, and this, push all the good stuff. And then it makes them look pathetic because they never had anything like that from their deal or their options that they put on the table. So well worth reminding about that for the future. So the Labour government has obviously pledged to improve Britain's very anemic levels of growth and now sees lower trade barriers with the EU as, of course, crucial now to exporters. It said that Monday's EU deal would add around £9 billion to the GDP by 2024, around 0.2% now level of output. The so-called reset, of course, of the EU follows a trade deal now with India and the agreement with the White House to lower tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. The economic boom, of course, now from closer trade deals with the EU, of course, largely offsets the higher US tariff costs on 60 billion now of UK goods. So again, 0.2, not exactly huge, of course, not exactly huge, but hey, it's a start. It's a start. And of course, as I have always said, when people realize, well, actually, why, all this, agreement with Europe is so good for our economy. It's all this, good stuff. Why aren't we part of single market? Why aren't we part of EU? Just adds all those questions, gets people starting to think, well, actually, maybe it is good being in there. Maybe it was a bad idea to Brexit. All these things starts that ball rolling. So back to this. Labour does obviously hope to use the EU agreement now as a launch pad now for deeper and more sustainable deal, with the Frontier Economics now estimates that could lift the GDP by 1%, but economists, of course, remain very wary of the political barriers to further liberalisation. This is what Bloomberg had to say on this. Both sides do appear to be sticking to their current position for the foreseeable future, meaning that the prospects now of a more integrated economic relationship will likely, of course, remain limited after, of course, the summit. The negotiated terms of the text settled around 2 a.m. European time on Monday night. In exchange now, of course, for longer terms fishery agreements, the EU, of course, dropped its request to time limit an agreement on food standards. Instead, the two sides will now work towards a common sanitary and phytosanitary area known as SPS, as well as an agreement on energy. Again, good. That will be good. That will help, again, lower all those things. That is a very Swiss thing to do there. You see that. Getting that sort of area sort of sorted out. We follow a lot of European standards anyway. Most of our industries want to follow European standards anyway. So why not just follow European standards anyway? That's what it's going to end up meaning in the long term. The UK will, of course, have to dynamically align with many relevant EU rules and accept the rule of the European Court of Justice now as the ultimate arbiter now for the bloc's laws. Again, that's good. Many companies want to do that anyway. accepting the ECJ in that is fine. As I've said before, the ECJ actually ruled in favour with us many, many times than it has actually against us when you look at the UK's track record at the ECJ. So, hey, that's good in the long run. The UK will also work to join the EU's Erasmus Student Plus exchange program, the time-limited youth visa scheme, which should provide now detailed visa path and ensure now the overall number of participants is acceptable to both sides, now in a win for the EU. According to one of the documents, the EU will also remove barriers to allow British visitors to use e-gates within the EU and will work to ease travel now for artists, the same draft says. So, again, something we talked about before. The lack of artists and musicians can't travel as easy as they used to because of Brexit. The fact that that is now potentially now going to be eased, good for artists, good for British culture in the long run. That is a very, very good win. Also, as part of Monday is the Defence and Security Pact. The EU and the UK will now establish a platform for two sides to work together in various areas, including information sharing, maritime and space security. Again, very, very good indeed. Critical for Britain, the bloc now commits to swiftly explore ways to allow the UK access to the joint EU procurement defence funds. Again, very good indeed for us for that. And of course, really good for the EU on that one. The Security and Defence Partnership will also now be based on dialogue and consultation mechanisms to facilitate the exchange of information, as well as steering and oversight of its implementation. The agreement says the collaboration will now cover both a regional and, of course, global issues. The two sides also now commit to working together to enhance military mobility, counter cyber threats, and make critical infrastructure far more resilient, and cooperate now on economic security matters as a global, such as now global steel overcapacity. Again, good. That is good. That is so, so good that we are getting that cooperation working together. And I want to remind you, a lot of people came to me when I said this stuff, oh, the EU will never want to work with the UK. Here it is. Anyway, the joint statement, of course, reached in the early hours of Monday morning, stretches now to 6 pages, reiterating, of course, support for Ukraine's war against Russia. It said that UK's foreign defence secretaries will, of course, hold policy dialogues with, of course, the high EU representatives now every 6 months. We are now committed to ensuring the full accountability now of war crimes and other serious crimes committed in connection to Russia's war of aggression, it said. Again, that's very good as well. I like that they've worked that in as well, getting Europe once again to really commit to supporting Ukraine. On migration, now a key concern for Starmer, amid now the electoral threat of reform. The statement said that both sides recognise now the need to work with countries now of origin and transit and prevent irregular channel crossings. Last week, so we'll see what obviously that turns into. Last week, the Prime Minister said his government was in talks with several countries that might receive failed asylum seekers. So we'll see what comes of that. But hey, that's good. That is very, very good. I think that is a very, very good start. And that's something I've been saying for the longest time. When you get a good government, when they're going to sort of do all this mood music, that is, hey, very, very good. Does it solve all the problems that Brexit created? Absolutely not. But hey, tell you what, it's a start. It is a start. I've always said, you get to a point where you go, this is Brexit. This is as best as it's going to be. They can't improve it any more than this. Should we be really thinking a lot of other stuff? Hey, I'm not always right when I make predictions, and I will admit that. But hey, sometimes when I get it right, I'm right. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.